good morning, everyone, and welcome to another exciting broadcast with us here at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. My name is Jesse. I'm your virtual guide for today, and a big welcome in across Canada and the U.S. for this very special broadcast as part of our epic cross-Canada virtual road trip. We are already past the halfway point of our road trip, which is crazy. Broadcast number 6 of 10 on our journey every single year that we get the chance to do with Parks Canada and the amazing folks at Canadian Geographic Education, highlighting the amazing stories of Parks Canada. Now, these are places that are not just rich in biology and geology, but incredible history as well. So today, we're going to be diving in a little bit with that, joining our friend Kun at the Bethune Memorial House National Historic Site. We're going to learn about this Canadian icon and address the themes of compassion and selflessness today. So I'm so excited to turn you over to Kun to dive us into this really special place. And then we've got some cool clips for you and some activities for you as well. Welcome into our Ken Danby crew as well, and all our YouTubers. Let us know where you're joining from, everybody. But Kun, without further ado, I'll turn it over to you. Welcome to the broadcast and take us away.
Welcome, friends! Today, we embark on an extraordinary journey through the time to learn about a remarkable Canadian, Dr. Norman Bethune. Though his name may not be familiar to all of us in Canada, the impact he made on others stretches far and wide, touches the lives of billions of people across the world. Norman was born on March 4th, 1890, which is 130 years ago. I join you today from Gravenhurst, Ontario, the place where he was born, now called Bethune Memorial House, one of many special National Historic Sites administered by Parks Canada. The historic house is on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people, including the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations, traditionally known as the Confederacy of Three Fires. Under the Williams Treaties, Robinson-Huron Treaties, and the Rice Lake Purchase, this is an expression of gratitude and appreciation to those on whose territory we gather, and were dedicated to honoring the indigenous peoples who have been living and working on this land for centuries. Now, together, we're going to follow three incredible journeys in the life of Norman Bethune. You'll see that despite facing many challenges, he never lost his compassion, courage, or selflessness. Without further ado, well, Jesse, let's rock the show.
Welcome to the First World War themed trench at Bethune Memorial House National Historic Site. Here you can learn how Dr. Bethune, serving the armed forces, carried the injured soldier on a stretcher back to a field hospital. Are you fast enough to save them? Can you move them smoothly enough not to causing them too much pain as you carry them over rough terrain while under attack? First, let's talk about compassion. It's like superpower helps people recognizing others are hurting. Dr. Bethune saw people suffering, decided to make a difference. In 1914, the First World War was declared. Norman was the eighth person all over Toronto to volunteer to join the army. He wanted to help the sick and injured soldiers, joining the number 2 Field Ambulance Medical Corps as a stretcher bearer. He served in Europe until he was wounded. Recovering from his wounds, he came back to Canada, returned to University of Toronto, graduated in medicine, officially Dr. Norman Bethune. The compassionate experience he had at the trench during the war made him want to re-enlist, this time in Royal Canadian Navy. He became the ship doctor aboard the HMS Pegasus, the seaplane tender, which was the early version of military aircraft carrier. Later on, he also joined the Canadian Royal Air Force as a medical officer. We think he might be the only Canadian who have served 3 branches of the military, Army, Navy, and Air Force. What a compassion. Now close your eyes and let's travel to Montreal in 1931. The Great War had ended and the world has experienced a global pandemic. Dr. Bethune was now a middle-aged man living in a tough time known today as the Great Depression. Family had very little food and it was difficult to find jobs. And if you got sick, you had to pay to see a doctor. Many people were sick, but they couldn't find the help they needed because they didn't have money to be able to pay their doctor. Dr. Bethune saw this injustice and decided to take an action. He believed in preventing illness, not just in treating them, and thought that publicly accessible health care should be the government's top priority. A healthy population could keep everyone safe. He didn't just talk the talk, he walked the walk. He said, let's say to the people, not how much have you got, but how best we can serve you. He worked to try and start a system in Canada to get everyone medical care, even if they had no money. He was frustrated that other doctors and leaders in Canada were not ready for that system yet. It would take nearly 30 years for another Canadian, Tommy Douglas, to convince leaders to start the healthcare system we have now. Working at the Royal Victoria Hospital in Montreal, specializing in chest surgery, he created new surgical instruments to make surgery less painful and quicker. Some of these inventions are still used today, nearly 100 years later. Even through war, the influenza pandemic, and the Great Depression, Dr. Bethune never gave up. He saw people were suffering and found solutions that showed his compassion for others in many ways. Always remember, compassion can change the world. Hi, I'm in the driver's seat of mobile blood ambulance located right in the visitor center of Bethune Memorial Health National Historic Site. Here, you can pretend to drive over the dusty, bumpy roads of Spain, delivering life-saving blood units to the front lines of the Spanish Civil War. Our friend Scott is so proud of courage shown by Dr. Bethune when he traveled to Spain. Let's hear what he has to say.
Do you know what courage is? Courage is when someone faces their fears or obstacles with bravery and determination. It's about making the right choices even when we're scared or uncertain. Maybe you've been courageous yourself, like when you had to go to a doctor or a dentist, or when you had to speak in front of others. Dr. Bethune showed incredible courage during the Spanish Civil War. In 1936, he learned that the Spanish people had elected a new government, but the person who lost the election wanted to take over Spain with the help of the Nazis. It was kind of like the world's biggest bully was trying to take over a country from its own people. Well, our friend Dr. Bethune thought this wasn't fair, so he raised money to go to Spain and help the Spanish people with his skills as a doctor at that time, during the time of war. When he got to Spain, he looked for ways to save lives, and he came up with the idea to collect blood donations from healthy people and then give the blood to the wounded soldiers or civilians. But first, he had to figure out how to keep the blood fresh, and he needed a truck to carry the donated blood. Well, even though it was dangerous to travel, he searched throughout Europe to find the perfect truck until he found one that reminded him of a milk truck from back home in Canada. It looked like the one you saw Kun driving in the visitor center. Well, next he found a refrigerator that could run on a type of gas called kerosene. That's so that he could keep the blood cold while traveling. And he knew a special chemical called sodium citrate, which would preserve the blood and keep it from clotting or getting thick, which is like what happens when you stop bleeding after a cut. Then he put all these tools together so he could make blood transfusion possible during the war. Well, lastly, he needed people to donate their blood. So in Madrid, the capital of Spain, Dr. Bethune organized blood donation events. He showed the Spanish people how their blood could save lives on the battlefront. Despite the Nazis winning that war and overthrowing the elected government, his courageous work in Spain gave the world a secret tool to help save lives during the Second World War. That's the mobile blood unit. So he taught us that courage means making difficult choices, even when we're scared. It's about facing our fears and obstacles with bravery and determination. Even if something seems scary or difficult, remember to be brave and to do what's right. You never know how much of a difference your courage can make.
Well, thanks, Scott. Dr. Basile really was courageous going into the battle with a blood transfusion truck to save people he didn't know. Jesse, I wonder what courage means to everyone watching today. Can we ask them?
We certainly can ask them, Kun. And I mean, for our YouTube audience, if you guys want to chime in the chat, please do. Ken Danby, welcome in, guys. If you want to put it in the chat as well, this is something that we can come back to throughout the remainder of the program. But Kun, first, I just wanted to highlight what an incredible story that is. Thank you guys so much for doing all that filming to make that possible for us to share. But what a special story. Is there anything else you want to dive in on with the courage and compassion elements before we talk about our third essence today?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you so much for allowing us to present the Dr. Basim story to everyone. To me, I was thinking courage definitely means being brave, being able to do things out of your comfort zone, which I'm also try to sort of encourage myself to do or my family to do. It's a very hard thing, but really, you just need to push yourself a little bit and try to be courageous. And I wonder if you guys have any reflections of the courage. Yeah.
Well, we can not only take them during the broadcast, but after the fact too. We've got some special resources for all our classes, a little bit more on Norman Bethune's life and linkages with that for our classes at the end. So stay tuned for that in an email. I want to note that I know from the speaker's perspective, it is really odd talking to a camera and a little green light. So it's been pretty courageous doing this cross-Canada virtual road trip for the first time for a lot of folks. So I want to do a special shout out to you and the whole team there at the Bethune National Historic Site, because you guys are doing an amazing job. We don't have anything just yet, Kun. So what I think we might do is dive in with our third story together. Is there any lead-in you want to give us before I bring up our video on part 3 together?
Yeah, part 3 is our most exciting, but all his story is pretty exciting all the time. But the last stop would be his time in China.
Fantastic. Well, let me bring this up for everyone, and we will dive in. Thanks for your patience, guys, and we'll get underway. Let's pull this go and start.
Our last stop is Dr. Basum's most well-known experience, the time he spent in China. He traveled to the other side of the world, where he demonstrated immense selflessness. Selflessness is ability to put someone else's needs ahead of our own without expecting a single thing in return. If you're selfless, you think more about others and less about yourself. You're generous and kind. Dr. Basum's journey to China was not easy, filled with danger and uncertainty during a time when Japanese invaded China. Determined to help those who were hurt in the war, he joined the 8th Army of China. Life in rural villages of China, 1930, was incredibly difficult. There were no electricity, running water, or proper medical supplies, and very little food. Dr. Basum endured hardship along the side of the people he served, refusing to eat more than a soldier's ration, even as his health declined. After rough six-day walks through the mountains, Dr. Basum arrived at a makeshift hospital that was in a really bad shape. At the hospital, people lacked the necessities like blankets and clean bandages to treat their wounds, and there wasn't enough food for everyone. In those shocking conditions, Dr. Basum wasted no time in getting to work, treating the most severe cases and providing much needed care to those in need. With only one traveling doctor, Dr. Norman Basum selflessly examined and treated the wounded. They took every afternoon teaching medical personnel, since very few Chinese people had ever received any formal medical training in the villages at this time. In his free moments, Dr. Basum would invent and manufacture many of the instruments he and his team of helpers needed. He built an operating room in an unused temple. He designed leg and arm splints. a sterilizer, and a stretcher racks, as well as an operating surgery table that could be carried by a horse. He performed an astonishing 115 operations in just under 3 days, refusing to leave if there was a single wounded person in need of his attention. Although he was busy, Dr. Bethune was often lonely. He longed for the comforts of home, books, conversation in his own language, and simply pleasure like coffee and a hamburger sandwich. Yet he found fulfillment in his important work, working selflessly, knowing that he was making a difference in the lives of those he served. Despite the huge challenges, Dr. Bethune remained undeterred. Tragically, Dr. Bethune's life was cut short when he developed blood poisoning after cutting his finger during the surgery. He passed away in a humble peasant's hut on November 12, 1939, at age of 49. So friends, let's remember Dr. Bethune's story, a journey of compassion, courage, and selflessness. His legacy teaches us even a single person can make the world a better place.
Outstanding. Kun, thank you so much for that. You guys did such an amazing job pulling those together again. That is a shockingly early time to pass away. That is truly, we're going to get to this in some of our questions. We're already getting some questions, but before we dive in with our Q&A with all our audience, YouTube and live alike, is there any last message you want to share in addition to the videos before we lead into that?
Are we good for the activity?
We are good. Yeah, if you want to share the activity, by all means, tell us
Sure.
all
Yeah,
about it.
we have a little bit of activity at the end for everyone to do after the presentation. So grab a piece of paper and a pen maybe and write those 3 big words. Yes, Jesse, you're doing great. So I wrote those 3 big words we just learned in the presentation: compassion, courage, and selflessness. And on the back of the page, you can draw some notes, write your ideas and reflections. I wrote something. Each of those paragraphs is what you have already done in your life or what you like to do to show those 3 big characters that I wrote something here. It's the compassion. I wrote, I want to volunteer for a local lighthouse program. Which is providing a safe shelter for the people who need.
Yeah.
And for the just give you some examples. For the
Please.
courage, I write, I like to keep learning piano at age 45. And this summer, maybe learn swim. I'm not a good swimmer. I want to improve that. And for the selflessness, I find it, it's such a big word. I couldn't even come up with anything that would be able to show or I even want to do could say I'm selflessness. So I want to hear what your thoughts on it.
Well, I'll say that if you succeed in those ventures, next year we will have to have you on in a swim up piano where you get to it out in the water. That would be an amazing broadcast. I would absolutely watch that. But these are really tricky things. You talked about volunteering. This is something that a lot of our students, especially our high school students today, will be familiar with. You generally, in most high schools, when I was in high school, you had to do 40 hours of volunteering to actually graduate your course. So if you keep that going throughout your life, I'm really privileged now to get the chance to volunteer in a number of ways in my community. That's a really good and easy way of being compassionate. But one of the nice things about these traits are that you can really exhibit them in every day. Your courage doesn't need to be like jumping through a pile of snakes to go climb a helicopter and swim with sharks. It can be something very, very small that you just have a little bit of nervousness about, that you commit to trying to get better at. You take baby steps to get better at. Compassion and selflessness are things that you can do every single day. So if you guys want to share any of these, by all means, we'd love to hear from you now, after, at any point during the broadcast and beyond. But it's just so nice to have the chance today to feature this incredibly Canadian story of Dr. Norman Bethune and the kindness that he exhibited throughout his life. I happen to love, as a Canadian, that a lot of our heroes, a lot of our iconic people, they're iconic because they're nice. That's like one of the great joys of being Canadian, is that that's the case. So big thank you to you, Kun, and for the entire team for sharing this story today. We are going to dive in with questions. So we're putting you on the spot anew. One of the first questions, as I said, is with regards to him dying so young. So the blood infection that he got, is that something that with nowadays, with modern medicine, would have been easy to treat, or would he have survived that had he not been in such a sort of middle of a challenging situation or far away from other people?
Definitely, if he had that cut today, that would be easily treated in the whether in the clinic or hospital, that he wouldn't die from the blood poisoning. But remember, in the video we talk about it's in the 1930s China rural area. Not only they don't have enough medical supplies, medical professionals to treat Dr. Basum. They don't even have food and like essential necessities they need to survive. So it is very unfortunately he wouldn't need to die that young. It's just remember right at the battlefront, right in the difficult time in China. It's just not those things. Today at our home, Canada hospital, those are easily accessed that which Dr. Bassoon wouldn't have at the time when he was in China. So
I
very
love
unfortunately.
I love when we get to talk about these things because I know, growing up, I assumed, oh, if I broke my arm, I'd go and I'd get it fixed in a few minutes. Or if I got an infection, I'd get penicillin and I'd be fine. And a lot of these interventions are still not possible in a lot of the world very readily. We are so, so fortunate here. And for our United States audience today, you can get ill and be healed pretty rapidly. And in Canada, you can do it for free, which is a really, really special thing. 100 years ago, pretty much everywhere on the planet, the medical situation was a lot different. And things that nowadays are easy to cure would have been life-altering or life-ending back then. So kudos to modern medicine for making that a little bit of a better situation.
For sure, we should feel really lucky like we live in the world today and appreciate it for the people who have done amazing things for all of us.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Ms. Evanbergen, if you guys want to say in the chat, if you want to come in for questions, I'll happily bring you in to say hi for as many as you'd like. YouTubers, you guys can keep sharing as well. But I'll start off with one other one, which might be a little tricky. Do we have a sense of how many people Dr. Bethune treated over his career or helped or healed, or any numbers to share?
Oh my goodness, I don't think there's the exact number that from when he became officially became Dr. Norman Bethune. I don't think any doctor would have that count at all. But
No.
just look at even the ratios, say just in rural China, that he was the only one professional, like a medical staff, versus like a 115,000 soldiers he's responsible, that ratio. It's amazing that you can imagine the responsibilities on his shoulder in China. And before China, when he was in the during the First World War, he was the only medical officer on the Pegasus, the ship he was working. That he's responsible for over 230 crew members. So that's a ratio. And that time he was only like in his early 20s. So I think through all his life, he probably responsible for a lot of his patients, and that number just incredible.
It is incredible. I feel really lazy. I've got to tell you, as a person who gets to do broadcasts for a living, I feel like I've been wasting my time compared to Dr. Bethune. It's quite an amazing feat. 115 things in 3 days is ridiculous in terms of helping people. That is well beyond what doctors today have the chance to do. Very, very cool. Ken Danby, I'm going to come to you guys live, actually. So if you want to flick on your mic, I'll come say hi, Ms. Evanbergen. Hi, guys. Welcome to the broadcast.
Oh, great to see faces.
Hi, I know. I'm excited. Share that first question live with us, and then we'll come back in a minute for more.
Okay. Here. So we have a few questions.
Perfect.
The first one was about the sodium substance, like how it helped clean the blood, and the second one was what blood type did that person have?
Ooh,
do they know?
Ooh, great.
Those are great questions. I wish I could be really have a lot of my science knowledge, but I believe the sodium substance is to it's like anti clotting the blood. So when Dr. Basum collecting blood in the city from healthy people, blood through blood donation, he have to find a way to keep the blood fresh and as a liquid stored in the proper equipment and be able to take the fresh blood right in the blood transfusion truck behind me. That's a model, of course, and then shipped to the battlefront. So he had a lot of trouble actually to figure out the blood type at the time in 1930s and also how to store blood properly. So it seems he be able to find the right equipment and also this, I guess, magical chemical at the time to be able to allow him to transport blood to the battlefront. So it was very challenging for him, for sure. He was the first person actually make this theory into the practice. He was able to develop this blood transfusion truck to actually putting the blood transfusion into practice. So it was quite amazing for his, I guess, invention at the time.
Yeah. It's still very challenging to get blood to where it needs to go. This is why Canadian Blood Services does such a great job of trying to get people donating all throughout the year, because blood is always in need. It only lasts for so long, and it's a very important thing. I know some of our students are a little too young to be donating blood just yet, but when you get older, if you have the chance to donate blood, it's one of the easiest, best ways that you can exhibit compassion and a little bit of courage. A lot of people are really afraid to give blood, but it's usually very fast. It doesn't hurt too much, I promise. I've done it many times, and so I'm really glad we got that question. Thanks, guys. We're going to head back. You guys have a student right at the camera, so come on back in, Ken.
Love to see the face.
How many patients that he cured in China?
Yeah.
So I'm just going to confirm the question. Like how, Jesse,
Yeah, it's sort of what I asked earlier. It's how many patients did he cure in China? So, I mean, you said 115,000 soldiers were sort of...
He's responsible for, because he was the only medical doctor at the time.
Yeah.
I remember those people, he also treating not only the soldiers in the army, he also look after just peasants, the farmers that where he lived, like in the village, the people living in the village. And beyond like treating individually person, he also trained so many medical professionals because he understand that just rely on himself, it won't be able to look after so many. So he every afternoon, I think when he lived in China, he started like medical lessons and actually started his medical schools. So I think that impact is much beyond him treating each individual patients. Yeah.
For sure. We I want to note, because our class today live is in Guelph. So imagine if there was one doctor in all of Guelph and they came in, there was no doctors, and then one comes in and has to train other doctors to make sure that everyone in Guelph stays healthy. Sounds outrageous and ridiculous. And that's what he was able to pull off. It's why he is so celebrated in China. To my knowledge, there are big statues of Norman Bethune in China to this day. He is lauded in every country that he had the chance to work with. Could you speak a little bit to his legacy? We're getting the chance to talk to him from this Canadian perspective today. Is there anything else you can share about how people sort of laud and recognize his work worldwide?
Oh, for sure. Like we talk about his name may not be familiar to all of us today, but believe or not to exaggerate, he's a household name in China. Until today, he's still voted as the top one like foreigner who has huge impact to Chinese history. Realistically, when you say you're going to China and you're saying, I'm from Canada, do you know a Dr. Norman Bethune? Everyone on the street probably going to tell, oh, yeah, of course. We learned about him and we'll learn his story.
Yeah.
And he's a Canadian. He represents like Canadian values, willing to lend his hand to help others. And we felt really close to Canada, even we don't really know much about Canada, but because of Dr. Bethune, we felt really Canada is home of Dr. Bethune, so must shares a lot of the values he brought when he was in China. It's hard. It's very like touching story for sure.
Next time I'm in Gravenhurst, I'm going to have to come and visit you in person. This sounds like I want to hear more and more about it.
Yeah, well, I wish everyone have a chance to visit the birthplace and to actually look at the exhibit yourself and to learn about this great Canadian doctor.
Very, very cool. Well, we're going to take another live question in just a minute. Time flies when you're having fun, but we had a great one about the First World War. So the Spanish flu was sort of the biggest pandemic in the world up until COVID. Can you speak a little bit about what might have happened to Norman Bethune around that? Was he involved in it? Did he get sick? Did he help people with this sort of the predecessor to COVID, so to speak, which we all lived through in the last few years?
For sure. Yeah, we didn't discover Bethune's pandemic story until we experienced COVID. We look at, oh my goodness, Bethune was the first responder during the Spanish flu. At the time, he was a medical officer on during the First World War. He aborted HMS Pegasus, being a medical doctor on the ship. I talked about he was responsible for over 230 member crews on the ship, and then half of the members caught Spanish flu. And while Dr. Bethune treating those patients himself actually contracted Spanish flu, which was very much like COVID we had. So he had to actually leave the army and rescue because he's sort of first like because he treating the patients, he got sick as well, and then he had to resign and then come back and rescue. And after that, he didn't stop his service, and he continued to join the Royal Canadian Air Force as a medical officer and keep doing his medical work with the military.
Wow. It's wild, and I want to put this in context for some of our students. I mean, COVID is sort of, again, very salient for all of us and killed, we think, between 10 and 15 million people in the world. We all lived through this. It was a really, really tragic time. The Spanish flu came on the wake of World War I and killed more people than World War I. So to that point, the greatest series of battles in the history of the world, and Spanish flu did more people in than that, and specifically a lot of really young, healthy people. So it was this again, really tragic time in world history. Norman Bethune really came onto the stage at this really interesting time where so much was changing. There was so much conflict in the world. We were building up medicine, and sort of serves as a hero in so many places, which is really, really special. So I'm so glad. Thank you for this. Couldn't to get a chance to talk about it all. Our live class had to go off for lunch, incidentally, but they had a question before they left, which is, are there any relatives alive today? Does Bethune have any people that are still great grandchildren, or did he have any kids? What's the deal?
Definitely remember, if he is alive today, he would be 134, 5. Yeah, he'd be very old.
Cool.
So when we talk about his relatives, would be the great grand generation. Himself, unfortunately, didn't have any children. That's, I think, very sad for his own life, for himself too. But he did have a older sister and younger brother, and they all have descendants. They're not necessarily living around Gravenhurst, the birthplace, but they spread out, some in United States, some in Southern Ontario, and occasionally they would come to visit a sort of great grand uncle, this birthplace, a national historic site. It's certainly great to hear from the family member.
That is very cool. Thank you for that, Kun. And unfortunately, didn't have any direct relatives, but we get the chance to highlight a few of them today just the same. This has been so much fun. Time flies and you're having fun in these broadcasts. So we're going to have to just encourage all our classes tuning in live or after the fact. We'll be sending along a big bevy of resources to keep the learning going when you're done. Links to the historic site and more. So if you want to learn even more about this incredible icon, there's lots of ways to do just that. I want to say a special thank you, not just to you and all our people featured in the video, but Sandra and Chris, the whole team there that helped make this possible. You guys did such an incredible job. And we will be doing this broadcast in Mandarin, as befits the Chinese connection, and in French later on next week. So we hope you'll get the chance to share that with your colleagues then. Kun, before we wrap up, is there any final message about Norman Bethune you want to share with us before we come say goodbye?
No, I just want to thank everyone who's participating, although I cannot see all of your face, but thanks for supporting the site and our message and joining us on this incredible journey through time with Dr. Bethune. Let's just celebrate compassion, courage, and selflessness, and the belief that one person can truly make a difference.
No better message than that. Thank you so much. I encourage all our classes, check out our road trip program, check out Canadian Geographic's education page to learn even more and enter for a chance to win some really cool prizes. And you can watch this on YouTube anytime you want if you want to learn more about Dr. Norman Bethune's legacy. Couldn't thank you so much. I'll say farewell. Have a wonderful day.